The HOA chairwoman stood on my pier, legal papers clutched tightly, ordering me to demolish it within 72 hours, completely oblivious that I legally controlled every gallon of water beneath her feet. Visualize this scenario. It's 6:45 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. I'm enjoying my first coffee on the pier I constructed by hand, observing dawn fog drift across the water like ethereal curtains. The timber groans beneath my weight, solid, dependable craftsmanship that weathered 3 harsh winters. Then I detect it, the aggressive tap of expensive shoes against my wooden planks. Victoria Blackwood marches toward me as if she controls the universe. "This monstrosity is destroying our home values," she declares sharply, thrusting documents toward my face. 72 hours to demolish it, or we'll seize your property." The coffee suddenly tastes harsh. The cedar-scented morning air seems frigid. This pier represented the final project my beloved wife Elena and I designed together before illness claimed her. "Ma'am," I respond calmly, "you should probably verify those boundary lines." She remained unaware that I didn't merely own the pier. I controlled the complete lake ecosystem. How would you react if some HOA dictator attempted to destroy your deceased wife's last wish? Share your most outrageous HOA horror story below. Where are you located? Tell me your region. Isn't this absolutely ridiculous? Let me explain how a mourning widower accidentally inherited more aquatic authority than most municipalities. My name is Daniel Fletcher, and 3 years ago I believed I was purchasing a peaceful retirement sanctuary to mend my shattered heart. Instead, I acquired a conflict with the community dictator. I'm 61 years old, recently retired after 3 decades engineering bridges that remain standing and water systems that function properly. 4 years ago, cancer stole my wife Elena. 28 years of marriage vanished during 16 agonizing months. We had planned this waterfront retreat together, drafting pier blueprints while she recovered between treatment sessions. She insisted I construct it regardless of whether she survived to enjoy it. "You're too determined to let some lake defeat you," she whispered during our final peaceful days together. So I honored that commitment and relocated to Clearwater Bay Estates, an idyllic development featuring 52 homes surrounding a pristine 180-acre lake. Property values ranging from $350,000 to $750,000. Physicians, entrepreneurs, retired educators. The type of neighborhood where residents actually acknowledge each other instead of filing complaints. The pier construction preserved my mental health. 8 months of meticulous engineering, every license obtained correctly, every fastener secured to specification. The municipal inspector described it as artwork masquerading as infrastructure. Elena would have cherished the dawn panorama from those hand-sanded pine boards, smooth as glass beneath bare soles. Then the Blackwood occupation commenced. Victoria Blackwood. Imagine if a corporate headshot materialized and decided to govern your community. 54 years old, platinum highlights costing more than my monthly utilities, and the type of authority figure grin that makes intelligent people secure their valuables. She purchased the largest residence on the lake 4 years ago, a Victorian mansion that screams, "My bathroom renovation exceeded your annual salary." Her spouse, Marcus, operates Blackwood Contracting, specializing in overpriced incompetence. Together they function like a 2-person neighborhood takeover unit. Within 10 months, Victoria had manipulated her way into the HOA chairmanship. The previous leadership, mostly septuagenarians who believed mature adults could manage their own properties, resigned rather than endure her vision of community enhancement. Her initial campaign, waterfront facility standardization for maximum property appreciation. Translation: everyone's pier must appear identical and be constructed by, guess who's contracting business? I retrieved my permits, engineering documentation, municipal approvals, everything legitimate, professional, legal. Victoria examined them like they were scrawled in finger paint. "Permits don't override community regulations, Mr. Fletcher," she announced, standing in my driveway with her clipboard of destruction. The morning sunlight reflected off her enormous diamond earrings as she gestured dismissively. "This commercial eyesore compromises our visual cohesion." Commercial eyesore? My pier was handcrafted pine with bronze hardware, following the shoreline's organic contours like it had grown naturally. But apparently Victoria preferred Marcus's floating synthetic platforms. Triple the expense, half the quality, and coincidentally half the community already owned them. The citation fluttered in the lake breeze, carrying her department store fragrance mixed with diesel fumes from Marcus's overcompensating pickup truck. $750 daily if I didn't destroy the non-conforming structure within 96 hours. Additionally, they would place a lien on my property. Emergency Community Preservation Authority, she proclaimed, with the confidence of someone who had binged too many legal dramas. I stood there, stones shifting under my work boots, watching this woman threaten to obliterate the last connection to my wife's dreams. The pier where I conversed with Elena's spirit each morning, where I scattered some of her remains on our wedding anniversary. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "you might want to verify your jurisdiction over that matter." That evening, I sat on my supposedly illegal pier, listening to water splash against the supports like gentle applause. A loon cried across the lake, that haunting, solitary sound that cuts through suburban absurdity. I remembered Elena's favorite expression: when bullies target engineers, they typically regret it. Time to visit the municipal records office and discover exactly what I had inherited. The following morning, I traveled to the county assessor's office with my coffee still warm and my engineer's mind in complete investigative mode. Here's what 3 decades of construction taught me. When someone claims you cannot do something, examine the documentation first, debate later. Carmen Rodriguez has staffed that records counter since Bush was president. She's the type of individual who recalls every unusual property dispute, every boundary conflict, every, wait, who actually owns what? Controversy. When I described Victoria's pier ultimatum, her experienced face brightened like holiday morning. "Riparian rights," she whispered, retrieving her magnifying lens. "Haven't encountered that terminology in decades. During engineering education, we had this instructor who emphasized one concept. Water rights represent the lawless frontier of property law. Most people assume if you purchase lakefront property, you own to the water's boundary and that's everything. But some historical deeds include something called riparian rights. Essentially, you don't just own the land. You own the authority to utilize the actual water for piers, vessels, recreation, whatever." I remembered thinking it sounded too beneficial to be accurate. My deed contained those magical words, including riparian rights to the flood stage mark. "This is intriguing," Carmen said, adjusting her thick spectacles. "Mind if I investigate further? I enjoy a challenging mystery." 30 minutes later, she emerged from the storage area appearing like she had discovered treasure. The musty aroma of century-old documents emanated from the manila folders in her arms. "Mr. Fletcher," she said, arranging papers across the counter, "your property has quite extraordinary history. Here's where circumstances became absolutely incredible. I didn't just inherit a house from some distant family member. I inherited water rights dating back to 1928 when my great-grandfather William Fletcher, a name I dimly recalled from family gatherings, persuaded the county to allow him to construct a dam across the natural stream. William was a hydraulic engineer who convinced the county to create this lake for preventing downstream floods while providing locals an attractive fishing location. Clever individual, that William. He retained permanent water management authority in the original contract. I drove home in complete shock, gravel crunching beneath my tires as my brain attempted to process this revelation. Victoria wasn't merely incorrect about my pier. She possessed absolutely zero legal jurisdiction over anything I did with the water. The irony was so dense you could slice it with an anchor. That evening, I attended Victoria's emergency board meeting. The community center reeked of industrial carpet deodorizer and burnt coffee from a machine that probably hadn't been serviced since the Reagan years. About 12 neighbors appeared, most looking like they preferred dental procedures. Victoria had prepared a comprehensive slideshow presentation, preserving our investment, the pier emergency. She had even recruited her brother-in-law, some attorney in a $2,000 suit who kept examining his expensive watch like he was charging by the second. "This non-compliant structure endangers our property values," Victoria declared, clicking through slides comparing my beautifully constructed pier to photographs of corroded, collapsing docks from unknown locations. "We must respond decisively to maintain community standards," the lawyer nodded seriously. "The HOA possesses clear jurisdiction under community agreements to regulate all waterfront construction." I stood up, retrieved Carmen's carefully duplicated documents, and calmly detonated my legal explosive. According to these county records, I said, my property includes water management jurisdiction dating back to when this lake was established. William was a hydraulic engineer who convinced the county to create this lake for preventing downstream floods while providing locals an attractive fishing location. Clever individual, that William. He retained permanent water management authority in the original contract. I drove home in complete shock, gravel crunching beneath my tires as my brain attempted to process this revelation. Victoria wasn't merely incorrect about my pier. She possessed absolutely zero legal jurisdiction over anything I did with the water. The irony was so dense you could slice it with an anchor. That evening, I attended Victoria's emergency board meeting. The community center reeked of industrial carpet deodorizer and burnt coffee from a machine that probably hadn't been serviced since the Reagan years. About 12 neighbors appeared, most looking like they preferred dental procedures. Victoria had prepared a comprehensive slideshow presentation, preserving our investment, the pier emergency. She had even recruited her brother-in-law, some attorney in a $2,000 suit who kept examining his expensive watch like he was charging by the second. This non-compliant structure endangers our property values, Victoria declared, clicking through slides comparing my beautifully constructed pier to photographs of corroded, collapsing docks from unknown locations. We must respond decisively to maintain community standards. The lawyer nodded seriously. The HOA possesses clear jurisdiction under community agreements to regulate all waterfront construction. I stood up, retrieved Carmen's carefully duplicated documents, and calmly detonated my legal explosive. According to these county records, I said, my property includes water management jurisdiction dating back to when this lake was established, Ted researching this HOA's formation 12 years ago. I suspect there might be significant issues with their original documentation. Driving home beneath a canopy of stars, I realized this was merely the beginning. 4 days later, Victoria launched her retaliation with the subtlety of a locomotive through a crystal shop. She organized an emergency community gathering for Saturday morning, complete with professionally designed announcements that probably cost more than my monthly phone bill. The banner proclaimed, "Protecting Clearwater Bay from legal manipulation and property value destruction." You had to respect her dedication to theatrics. The community center was packed beyond capacity. Victoria had converted the space into her personal tribunal, complete with a projection screen, and her brother-in-law attorney positioned at a folding table like he was conducting a war crimes investigation. The entire place smelled of industrial coffee and nervous perspiration. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria announced, clicking through slides comparing my pier to rusty structures from abandoned developments, "we confront an unprecedented challenge to our community stability. One homeowner is utilizing falsified documentation to circumvent legitimate HOA jurisdiction." Falsified documentation. My engineer's blood began boiling. I had witnessed numerous construction disputes throughout my career, but direct accusations of fraud crossed into personal attack territory. Her lawyer, let's call him Mr. Overpriced Suit, nodded gravely. These alleged riparian rights are clearly outdated technicalities with no relevance to modern community governance. The HOA maintains absolute jurisdiction under current agreements. That's when I recognized Victoria had committed a critical error. She was so focused on attacking my character, she had forgotten to actually research the law. The next morning, armed with more coffee and a growing suspicion that William had been one cunning genius, I returned to Carmen's records desk. "I need to examine everything about how this lake system was created," I told her. "Blueprints, agreements, engineering reports, everything." Carmen disappeared into the archives like a woman with a mission. 90 minutes later, she emerged clutching folders thick enough to use as building materials, her eyes sparkling with the enthusiasm of a genuine bureaucratic investigator. "Your great-grandfather, William," she said, spreading century-old maps across the counter, "wasn't just constructing a dam, he was resolving the county's entire flooding crisis." The documents revealed an incredible story. In 1928, spring flooding regularly devastated 4 townships downstream. William proposed an ambitious solution: dam Clearwater Creek, establish a retention lake system, and construct overflow channels to manage seasonal water surges. The county was so desperate for flood control, they essentially gave him unlimited authority. His original agreement granted permanent water management rights for all tributaries and waterways within regional boundaries, a deal so comprehensive it made my head spin. William didn't just own the lake. He controlled every creek, stream, and drainage channel that fed the entire watershed system. But wait, Carmen said with the grin of someone saving the best surprise for last. There's more. She retrieved payment ledgers spanning decades. The county had been faithfully depositing annual water management fees into a trust account, money I never knew existed. The current balance with accumulated interest was $923,000. I stared at those numbers, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Victoria was threatening to fine me $750 daily for exercising rights worth nearly $1 million. That evening, Eleanor Martinez arrived at my kitchen table with her legal arsenal, reading glasses, legal pads, and the predatory smile of an attorney who had just detected weakness in the opposition. "This is remarkable," she murmured, studying William's contracts by my kitchen lamp. "Your great-grandfather essentially became a private utility company. These rights don't just supersede HOA authority, they supersede almost everything." "Eleanor," I said, watching her make rapid notes, "what happens if an HOA has been operating beyond their legal boundaries?" She looked up with the expression of someone who had just solved a particularly satisfying puzzle. "Well, if they've been collecting fees for water access they don't control, charging for permits they can't legally issue." She trailed off, scribbling calculations. "We need to examine their incorporation documents immediately. If this HOA was established without properly researching existing water rights, their entire legal foundation might be constructed on quicksand." The next evening, I attended Victoria's follow-up community meeting, her attempt to rally support after the previous week's legal bombshell. This time I arrived prepared. When she opened the floor for questions, I stood up with a manila folder containing William's water management agreements. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said conversationally, "before we discuss peer regulations, I'm curious. Did the HOA obtain water rights authorization when it was incorporated 12 years ago?" The room went completely silent. Victoria's confident smile flickered like a faulty bulb. That's irrelevant," she stammered. "We're discussing current community standards." "Actually," I continued, "since the HOA has been collecting water access fees from homeowners, I assume you have documentation proving you control those water rights." Her brother-in-law lawyer suddenly developed intense interest in his briefcase contents. 3 board members exchanged worried glances. "This meeting isn't about your fabricated claims," Victoria snapped, her composure cracking like thin ice. "Ma'am," I replied, "these aren't fabricated. They're recorded with the county and backed by 95 years of legal precedent. Would you like to see the payment records?" Walking home under the stars, I realized Victoria had just made her second crucial mistake. She had challenged an engineer to a documentation fight. Victoria's next move was so predictably vindictive, I almost admired her commitment to being terrible. 3 days after embarrassing her at the community meeting, I awakened to the apocalyptic sound of splintering wood and my neighbor Jake Anderson hammering on my front door at 6 a.m. Through my kitchen window, I could see what used to be my pier, now resembling the aftermath of a very angry, very large beaver attack. "Daniel!" Jake shouted, still wearing his bathrobe and slippers. "You need to see this catastrophe." Marcus Blackwood's boat bobbed innocently about 40 yards offshore, engine purring like a satisfied cat. Marcus himself stood at the controls wearing an expression that screamed, "Who, me?" louder than a fire alarm. The corner of my pier, the exact location where Elena and I had planned to install a memorial plaque, lay in pieces like shattered dreams. "Mechanical malfunction," Marcus yelled across the water, gesturing helplessly at his perfectly functional motor, throttle stuck in forward gear. "Really sorry about the damage. I'll help you clean up, sure, Marcus. And I suppose Santa Claus has been using your boat for weekend fishing trips." I walked down to survey the destruction, my bare feet finding every sharp splinter like a cruel game of hopscotch. The smell hit me immediately. Diesel fuel mixing with lake water and 30 years of engineering pride reduced to floating debris. Of all the locations Marcus could have accidentally struck, he had managed to destroy the one section that meant the most to me. In engineering school, they teach you to recognize patterns. When someone threatens your property on Monday and accidentally destroys it on Thursday, that's not mechanical failure. That's felony stupidity. But here's the beautiful thing about being an engineer. We document everything. While Marcus was probably celebrating with Victoria over their brilliant sabotage plan, I was calmly installing security cameras and calling in favors from 30 years of professional relationships. That afternoon, as I rebuilt the damaged section with lumber that smelled like fresh determination, Eleanor called with news that made Marcus's little boat stunt seem like a parking violation. "I've been examining the HOA's incorporation documents," she said, her voice crackling with the excitement of a lawyer who had found legal gold. "Daniel, they never filed proper water rights research when they formed. State law requires any waterfront HOA to document existing riparian rights before claiming regulatory authority." I stopped mid-swing, my hammer frozen above a half-driven nail. English translation? This HOA has been operating illegally for 12 years. Every fee they've collected, every fine they've issued, every waterfront regulation they've enforced, it's all legally void. They're like a restaurant operating without a health license. Except instead of serving contaminated food, they've been serving contaminated legal advice. While Eleanor explained the finer points of HOA law, I noticed familiar engine noise approaching. Marcus's boat was making another reconnaissance pass, this time carrying Victoria like Cleopatra on her yacht. They cruised close enough that I could smell her department store perfume, battling Marcus's exhaust fumes for olfactory dominance. "Pier's looking good. Fletcher," Marcus called with the fake enthusiasm of a telemarketer. "Real shame about that mechanical problem. These old engines, just can't trust them, you know?" Victoria sat beside him like a fashion display, her designer sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun while she studied my repair work with the intensity of a military strategist planning the next offensive. That evening, my insurance company called. Marcus had already filed his incident report, a masterpiece of creative writing detailing his heroic efforts to avoid collision despite catastrophic throttle malfunction. His story was so thoroughly rehearsed it belonged in amateur theater, but Marcus and Victoria had made one fatal error. They had assumed they were dealing with some confused widower who would crumble under pressure. Clearly, nobody had mentioned that antagonizing an engineer is like poking a sleeping dragon with a very sharp stick. Thursday evening, I made strategic phone calls, first to Luis Martinez, a marine mechanic who owed me a favor from a bridge inspection project, second to Detective Williams from County Water Patrol, third to Patricia Chen, the water rights attorney who specialized in making HOA bullies weep. "Maritime sabotage," Patricia laughed when I described the situation. "That's a new one for my portfolio. But if you can prove intentional damage to property protected by federal water rights, we're talking serious criminal charges." Friday morning brought my personal justice team, the insurance adjuster, Detective Williams Luis with his toolbox, and enough documentation to overwhelm a bureaucrat. While they examined the wreckage, I provided the security footage that would make Marcus very unhappy. Luis's mechanical diagnosis was poetry in motion. "This throttle's been deliberately modified," he announced, pointing to fresh tool marks. "Someone rigged this thing to stick in forward gear. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was premeditated maritime stupidity." Detective Williams made careful notes while photographing everything. "Mr. Fletcher, based on this evidence, will be filing charges for criminal mischief, insurance fraud, and destruction of historically protected property." That afternoon, Marcus received a surprise visit from county deputies with handcuffs and very serious expressions. By sunset, the neighborhood was buzzing like a disturbed hornet's nest, and Victoria had discovered that being married to a felon wasn't part of her community leadership vision. That weekend, while Marcus was discovering that orange jumpsuits don't complement anyone's complexion, Eleanor and I transformed my kitchen table into mission control for the most shocking family secret since someone discovered their grandmother was a spy. "Sweet mother of pearl," Eleanor whispered, her reading glasses nearly sliding off her nose as she opened a folder marked Fletcher Water Trust, Confidential County. Records, the papers inside, smelled like old libraries and forgotten authority. That musty scent of documents that have been quietly changing the world while everyone else was watching television. What we found didn't just change my situation. It rewrote the rules of the entire game. William Fletcher, my eccentric great-grandfather who I barely remembered from childhood family reunions, hadn't just built a nice little lake for fishing. He had engineered himself into becoming the unofficial water emperor of half the county. The original 1928 agreement was a masterpiece of legal foresight. When the county begged William to solve their devastating flood problem, he didn't just construct one dam. He created an integrated water management system covering 4 townships. In exchange, they granted him exclusive authority over all water distribution within regional watershed boundaries. Translation: I didn't just own the lake. I owned the water supply for 18,000 people. Look at this payment ledger, Eleanor said, her voice cracking with disbelief. She spread out decades of financial records like she was revealing buried treasure. The county's been depositing annual water management fees into a trust account since 1952. Current balance. She paused for dramatic effect, then slid the bank statement across the table. $923,000 plus 71 years of compound interest. I nearly choked on my coffee. Nobody told me about this money. Classic bureaucratic shell game, Eleanor explained. The county sent reports to William's estate lawyers, assuming someone was managing the trust. The lawyers filed everything properly, assuming the county was handling day-to-day operations. Everyone did their job, but nobody connected the dots when William died. But the real nuclear bomb was buried in Clearwater Bay Estates' development. Paperwork from 2011. The builders had apparently assumed the lake was standard county-managed public water. They had never researched existing water rights, never consulted historical agreements, never discovered that their entire waterfront development was built on someone else's liquid property. This HOA, Eleanor said, tapping her pen against the evidence pile, has been operating like they own water rights they never actually possessed. Every dock permit, every boat regulation, every water access fee they've collected, it's all legally meaningless. The scope of my inherited authority was breathtaking. Complete control over Clearwater Lake and its tributary network. Regulatory power over 4 major creeks serving neighboring developments. Environmental oversight for the county's western stormwater system. Authority over 3 municipal water intake points. Final approval rights for any construction affecting watershed areas. I owned more water authority than some small cities. But here's the truly delicious irony, Eleanor continued, pulling out the HOA's insurance policies. If they'd been operating without legal water rights authorization, their insurance coverage could be completely void. All those overpriced construction contracts Marcus pushed through, the community could demand full restitution. My engineering brain started calculating the cascading implications. Victoria hadn't just been illegally harassing me. She had been running a fraudulent organization that had collected hundreds of thousands in fees for services they couldn't legally provide. Eleanor, I said, staring at documents that essentially made me a private utility company. What if I decided to exercise these rights fully? Her eyes lit up with the predatory gleam of an attorney who had just spotted the legal equivalent of a winning lottery ticket. Well, you could shut down boat traffic, regulate water levels, halt any waterfront construction, control environmental impact assessments, and oversee municipal water operations. In other words, I could turn off half the county's water infrastructure before breakfast. But with great power comes the terrifying realization that you're now responsible for not destroying thousands of people's lives. The question wasn't whether I could annihilate Victoria's little HOA kingdom. It was whether I was wise enough to use this power responsibly. Monday morning, I did what any rational person does when they accidentally inherit enough water rights to hold a county hostage. I assembled the legal equivalent of the Avengers. First call went to Patricia Chen, the water rights attorney Eleanor had recommended. Patricia showed up at my door Tuesday afternoon looking like she could negotiate international treaties before lunch and still have time to demolish a corrupt city council by dinner. She drove a Mercedes that whispered expensive competence and carried a briefcase that probably cost more than Marcus's boat. Mr. Fletcher, she said, settling into my kitchen while speed-reading William's documents like she was cramming for the Supreme Court. In 25 years of practicing water law, I've never seen private rights this bulletproof. You don't just own water, you own the plumbing for half the county. Next came Dr. Jennifer Rodriguez, an environmental engineer who specialized in watershed management and spoke the same language as my engineering brain. She arrived with enough scientific equipment to stock a small laboratory, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from actually knowing what you're talking about. This is phenomenal, she said, studying William's system maps while her laptop displayed real-time environmental data. Your great-grandfather built a flood prevention network that's still saving millions in property damage every spring. This isn't just about beating an HOA. This is about protecting an entire ecosystem. Eleanor brought her legal warfare expertise and a contact list that read like a directory of people who make municipal officials nervous. Jake volunteered his construction knowledge and served as our inside source in HOA politics. Plus, he made coffee strong enough to wake William's ghost. But our secret weapon was Carmen, who had been quietly watching this administrative train wreck from the county records office for 12 years. "Sweetie," she said, spreading documents across my table like a dealer in the world's most boring casino. "I've been waiting for someone to expose this HOA's little water rights fantasy. They've been collecting fees for authority they never possessed. And, honey, that's called fraud where I come from." Our first War Council session felt like planning a heist, if heists involved massive amounts of paperwork and environmental law, instead of explosives and getaway cars. The aroma of Jake's industrial-strength coffee mixed with the vanilla scent of century-old documents while we plotted Victoria's legal downfall. "Your water rights don't just supersede HOA authority." Patricia laid out our nuclear options. "They supersede almost everything. Federal environmental law, state utility regulations, municipal ordinances. They all bow to historical water management agreements. Here's something they don't teach in homeowner guides. When you inherit property with historical utility rights, you also inherit what lawyers lovingly call successor liability. Basically, you become responsible for maintaining infrastructure that entire communities depend on. It's like inheriting your grandfather's house and discovering the basement contains the city's main electrical grid." Dr. Rodriguez's environmental assessment delivered both good and terrifying news. Williams' engineering is still sound, but the dam system needs $2.8 million in upgrades within 4 years. The county's budgeted $450,000, completely unaware they don't actually control the infrastructure. The beautiful irony: my trust fund, fattened by decades of county payments, could cover most of those repairs. Jake's insider intelligence proved invaluable. Victoria's been running Marcus's construction deals like her personal ATM. No competitive bidding, no board oversight, no quality inspections. The community's electrical system is held together with hope and electrical tape. We documented systematic financial abuse, unauthorized contracts, inflated prices and fee collections for services the HOA couldn't legally provide. Marcus had been billing premium prices for bargain basement work, while Victoria provided political cover. Eleanor uncovered the most outrageous scam: homeowners paying water access fees at closing that went straight into HOA accounts. Families had shelled out thousands for dock rights that were legally meaningless, like paying admission to a museum you already own. But here's where our strategy got deliciously clever. Instead of using my water rights like a legal sledgehammer, we would offer to solve the problems Victoria's incompetence had created. "This is beautiful," Patricia explained, outlining our approach. "You hold enough power to shut down their entire operation, but you're choosing diplomacy first. That makes you the responsible adult and Victoria the petty tyrant in any public narrative." Our 3-phase plan was elegant. First, establish my legal authority publicly and officially. Second, offer collaborative solutions that benefit everyone. Third, let Victoria's own reaction expose her true character when faced with someone who couldn't be bullied. Dr. Rodriguez would conduct a comprehensive watershed health assessment, documenting how proper management could improve everyone's property values and environmental quality. Eleanor would organize community education sessions about real property rights versus HOA marketing fiction. Patricia would file the legal paperwork that would make my authority official and undeniable. "One prediction," Jake said with the grin of someone anticipating premium entertainment: when Victoria realizes she's been outmaneuvered by actual legal authority, the meltdown's going to be spectacular. Time to teach this community the difference between legitimate leadership and bullying with a clipboard. Victoria's next move proved that desperate people with too much money make spectacularly bad decisions. Thursday morning brought a certified letter so thick it could stop small-caliber bullets, delivered by a process server who looked like he moonlighted as a bouncer. The return address read Sterling & Associates, one of those white-collar law firms where the hourly rate could finance a small country's defense budget. The letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation disguised as sophisticated language. They accused me of systematic document fabrication, conspiracy to defraud community assets, and my personal favorite, exploiting grief-induced psychological instability to circumvent legitimate governance structures. Apparently, losing Elena had scrambled my brain so badly that I couldn't distinguish between real property rights and elaborate fantasies. Who knew widowhood came with automatic legal incompetence? They demanded immediate peer removal, payment of $52,000 in accumulated fines and legal fees, plus a public apology for disrupting community stability through fraudulent claims. The deadline, 72 hours, or they would file federal fraud charges. I was still marveling at their creative legal theory when Patricia called, cackling like someone who had just won the lottery and discovered their ex-spouse had been audited on the same day. "Daniel," she wheezed between laughs, "their lead attorney just called wanting to discuss reasonable settlement terms before examining your documentation." When I mentioned federal water rights and 95 years of county payments, he went silent for 45 seconds. Then he asked if we would accept a nuisance settlement to avoid costly litigation. But Victoria was just warming up her publicity campaign. That afternoon, she launched a social media assault that would have impressed a political dirty tricks operative. Facebook rants, neighborhood app manifestos, even a professionally produced YouTube video filmed in her kitchen with lighting that probably cost more than my truck. "Fellow residents," she announced to her phone camera with the practiced sincerity of a telemarketer, "we face an unprecedented threat from someone exploiting personal tragedy to steal community assets. This man is clearly struggling with grief-related mental health issues, and we must protect ourselves from those who would manipulate our compassion." Jake forwarded me screenshots from the neighborhood social media group where Victoria's supporters were crafting increasingly creative conspiracy theories. Someone suggested I might be part of an organized crime syndicate, specializing in HOA hostile takeovers. Another theorized that Patricia was my romantic partner, and we were running an elaborate insurance scam. The entertainment value was priceless, but Victoria had made a fatal error. She had forgotten that some neighbors actually possessed functioning brain cells. Eleanor's quiet property rights education sessions had been building underground momentum like a subway system. Her coffee meetings had evolved into standing room-only gatherings as homeowners, discovered exactly how little legal authority HOAs actually wield versus how much they pretend to have. Here came the mini twist that changed everything. Dr. Rodriguez's official watershed assessment arrived with the full bureaucratic weight of County Engineering Department letterhead. Her report documented that Williams' flood control system had prevented an estimated $52 million in downstream damage over 9 decades, and that my great-grandfather's engineering was still protecting thousands of homes every spring. The county engineer's office, finally understanding who actually controlled their critical infrastructure, sent me an official letter recognizing my hereditary water management authority and begging for a meeting about collaborative maintenance planning. That's when Victoria made her second catastrophic mistake. She called the state environmental agency, claiming I was illegally manipulating public water systems for personal gain. The environmental inspector who arrived Friday morning was Maria Santos, a woman who looked like she had been personally trained by Mother Nature to destroy people who waste her time. She spent 6 hours examining Williams' dam system, reviewing maintenance logs and testing water quality with equipment that probably cost more than my house. Her verdict was poetry. "This is the finest private water management system I've inspected in 18 years. Whoever's maintaining this infrastructure deserves recognition, not investigation." When Inspector Santos discovered that Victoria had filed a fraudulent emergency report, her expression could have flash-frozen the lake itself. "Ma'am," she informed Victoria with the deadly calm of someone explaining federal crimes, "false environmental emergency reports carry serious penalties. Our legal department will be contacting you." But Marcus, apparently feeling left out of the family's legal troubles, decided to contribute his own special brand of genius. Still facing criminal charges for peer sabotage, he organized a neighborhood safety patrol to monitor my property for suspicious activities. Their surveillance operation was so professional it belonged in a comedy show, parking in my driveway to take photos, following me to the hardware store like discount private investigators, and documenting my unusual behavior of drinking coffee on my own pier. Even my mail carrier started commenting on the amateur spy network camped outside my house. But Marcus's surveillance team was so busy watching me, They completely missed Patricia's process server delivering harassment restraining orders to their own front doors. By Sunday, Victoria's legal strategy was collapsing faster than Marcus's construction reputation, and the final showdown was inevitable. By Monday morning, Victoria had officially graduated from neighborhood nuisance to full-blown domestic terrorist with a real estate license. Her latest stroke of genius: filing an emergency petition claiming my dam posed imminent catastrophic risk and demanding the county seize it under eminent domain. Apparently, if she couldn't steal my water rights through HOA intimidation, she would get the government to steal them for her. The county engineer who arrived Tuesday morning looked like he would rather be performing surgery on live wolverines. Robert Martinez had been managing municipal infrastructure since the Ford administration, and his expression suggested he had received the kind of phone call that makes grown bureaucrats question their career choices. "Mr. Fletcher," he said, examining Williams Dam with the appreciation of someone who recognizes superior craftsmanship, "I've reviewed Mrs. Blackwood's emergency petition. She claims this 95-year-old structure is deteriorating rapidly and poses immediate flood danger to downstream communities." He paused, running his weathered hands along Williams' flawless concrete work like he was petting a well-behaved dog. "Son, this is some of the finest flood control engineering I've seen in 4 decades. Your great-grandfather built something that's still protecting thousands of homes better than most modern systems." Robert's inspection lasted 6 hours and covered every bolt, valve, and drainage channel with the thoroughness of someone whose report would determine whether Victoria faced federal charges for filing false emergency claims. His verdict was poetry wrapped in bureaucratic language. "This infrastructure exceeds all current safety standards and appears to have been maintained to museum-quality specifications." But Victoria wasn't satisfied with merely wasting one government agency's time. That afternoon, she launched what I can only describe as bureaucratic carpet bombing. Simultaneous complaints to the EPA, Army Corps of Engineers, State Water Authority, County Health Department, and Department of Homeland Security, claiming I was operating illegal industrial water processing facilities that threatened regional security. The parade of federal inspectors who invaded my property that week looked like a convention of people who desperately wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. Each agency sent their most experienced investigators, expecting to find some kind of environmental Chernobyl worthy of national emergency response. Instead, they found Williams' meticulously maintained system, complete with maintenance logs that read like love letters to proper engineering and water quality data that made municipal treatment plants look like mud puddles by comparison. The EPA inspector actually asked for my permission to use Williams' design in her agency training materials. "This is textbook watershed management," she said, taking photos of the overflow channels. "Whoever built this understood hydrology better than most of our current contractors." But while Victoria was busy filing fraudulent reports across the entire federal government, Marcus decided to contribute his own special brand of criminal creativity to the family's legal troubles. Wednesday night, my security cameras captured Marcus and 2 of his construction cronies attempting to sabotage the dam's overflow system with bolt cutters and what appeared to be a complete absence of functioning brain cells. Their plan, as far as I could determine, was to create actual safety problems that would validate Victoria's false emergency reports. The footage was so clear it looked like a training video for how not to commit infrastructure terrorism. Marcus cutting critical flood control cables while his accomplices provided lookout services with all the professional competence of intoxicated shopping mall security guards, I called Detective Williams at dawn Thursday. She arrived with backup and expressions that suggested Marcus's morning was about to become significantly less pleasant than he had planned. "Mr. Fletcher," she said after reviewing the security footage, "this isn't vandalism. Sabotaging flood control infrastructure during spring flood season is federal terrorism. We're talking 25 years minimum." Marcus's arrest that morning drew a crowd like a neighborhood block party, except instead of barbecue grills and lawn chairs, we had handcuffs and federal charges. Even Victoria's spy network suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere when the FBI Terrorism Task Force arrived, but Victoria's response to her husband's terrorism arrest proved that some people can't recognize rock bottom even when it hits them in the face with a federal indictment. She called a press conference, not a neighborhood meeting or HOA gathering, but an actual press conference with a makeshift podium in her driveway and printed statements that probably violated several libel laws. The morning air carried the scent of desperation mixed with expensive perfume as she faced local media and a growing crowd of neighbors who had come for the entertainment value. "My husband is the victim of an elaborate conspiracy," she announced to cameras that were recording what would become the county's most watched YouTube video. "This Fletcher character has systematically corrupted government agencies, fabricated historical documents, and orchestrated a criminal enterprise designed to steal our community's water assets." When a reporter asked for evidence of my document fabrication, Victoria's confident smile developed the stability of a house built on quicksand. "The evidence is being suppressed by corrupt federal agents who are obviously part of this conspiracy," she declared, apparently unaware that accusing FBI investigators of criminal conspiracy on live television isn't traditionally considered a winning legal strategy. That night's news featured Victoria claiming the federal government was helping me steal water while her husband sat in federal custody for terrorism. The final showdown was inevitable. The town council meeting that Thursday evening was standing room only, like a heavyweight championship fight where everyone knew the underdog was about to knock out the champion. Word had spread through 4 counties about the water rights war, and the community center was packed tighter than a rush-hour subway car. Local TV crews had set up cameras. Newspaper reporters clutched notebooks like lifelines. Even a few YouTubers were streaming live to audiences who had apparently never seen a middle-aged widower destroy an HOA president using nothing but historical documents and basic common sense. The air buzzed with anticipation and industrial strength. Coffee from the concession stand that some enterprising teenager had set up in the parking lot. You could practically taste the drama. Victoria arrived fashionably, late in a black SUV that screamed, "I'm important and everyone should notice," flanked by what remained of her legal team. Basically one very nervous attorney who looked like he would rather be defending serial killers. She dressed for battle in a power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her designer heels clicking across the linoleum like a countdown timer. Marcus was notably absent, having discovered that federal terrorism charges don't come with bail options. Council Chairman Michael Torres called the emergency session to order with the weary expression of someone who had been dragged into a soap opera. When he had signed up to discuss sewer maintenance and road repair budgets, "We're here to address the Clearwater Lake water rights dispute," he announced. "And I want everyone to know we've invited representatives from the county attorney's office, the state environmental agency, and the Federal Water Management Bureau to provide expert testimony." Victoria took the podium first, her confident smile suggesting she still believed charm and volume could overcome federal documentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we're here because one man's elaborate fraud scheme has disrupted our peaceful community and corrupted multiple government agencies." She launched into a PowerPoint presentation that would have impressed a conspiracy theorist, complete with charts allegedly proving that my water rights were obviously fabricated and that the various government inspections were clearly coordinated deception. She claimed I had somehow bribed federal agents, forged century-old documents, and manipulated the county's computerized record system. "This man," she declared, pointing at me like I was a war criminal, "has exploited his wife's tragic death to generate sympathy while systematically stealing community assets through an elaborate confidence scheme that has fooled even experienced investigators." The audience stirred uncomfortably. Bringing Elena into the circus had just crossed a line that even Victoria's supporters recognized as unacceptable. County Attorney Lisa Rodriguez took the podium next, carrying a briefcase thick enough to use as a defensive weapon. "Mrs. Blackwood," she said in the tone reserved for explaining simple concepts to complicated people, "we've conducted a comprehensive investigation of Mr. Fletcher's water rights claims. Every document has been verified through multiple sources, including federal archives, state historical records, and county engineering files dating back to 1928. She presented official findings. Williams' water management agreements were legitimate. My inheritance was properly documented. The county had been paying water management fees into my trust account for 71 years. The HOA had been operating without proper water rights authorization since its formation. Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, Mrs. Blackwood has filed 16 false reports with various agencies over the past month, wasting thousands of taxpayer dollars and federal resources. Her husband is currently facing terrorism charges for attempting to sabotage critical flood control infrastructure. EPA Inspector Maria Santos stepped to the microphone with the authority of someone who had spent decades separating environmental fact from fiction. I've inspected Mr. Fletcher's water management system extensively. It represents some of the finest private watershed stewardship in the region. Mrs. Blackwood's claims of environmental danger are not only false, they're deliberately fraudulent. But the real knockout punch came from Dr. Rodriguez, who presented her comprehensive watershed assessment with the calm precision of someone stating mathematical facts. William Fletcher's flood control system has prevented an estimated $52 million in downstream damage over 9 decades, she announced. Mr. Fletcher's continued stewardship of this infrastructure is critical to regional flood protection. The HOA's attempts to interfere with this system have actually threatened public safety. When Chairman Torres asked if I wanted to respond, I stood up and walked to the podium, carrying a single manila folder. The room went dead silent except for the hum of TV cameras and someone's nervous cough. "Folks," I said, "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to honor my wife's memory by maintaining a pier she helped design. But when Mrs. Blackwood decided to turn grief into a weapon and harassment into entertainment, she forced me to defend rights I never even knew I had." I opened the folder and pulled out the county's official recognition of my water management authority. This isn't about revenge or power, it's about responsibility. I inherited the obligation to protect infrastructure that keeps your home safe from flooding, and I take that seriously. The room erupted in applause that lasted so long the chairman had to call for order. Victoria sat frozen, her confident smile finally extinguished like a candle in a hurricane. 8 months later, the transformation was so complete it felt like we had time traveled to a dimension where HOAs actually serve communities instead of terrorizing them. Marcus was serving 22 months in federal prison, learning that orange jumpsuits clash with everyone's complexion and that terrorism charges don't come with early parole. For good behavior, Victoria had sold her house in a fire sale and disappeared to inflict her clipboard tyranny on some unsuspecting community 4 states away. Good riddance to both of them. The emergency HOA election 4 days after the town hall meeting felt like democracy in action. Eleanor Martinez won the presidency unanimously, bringing actual legal expertise and revolutionary concepts like treating neighbors with respect to community leadership. Her first official act was a public apology to me, and a promise that harassment would never again masquerade as community standards. The Clearwater Watershed Conservation Trust became our masterpiece, proof that cooperation beats corruption every time. Using Williams' $923,000 trust fund plus matching federal grants, we transformed aging flood control infrastructure into a state-of-the-art environmental protection system that monitoring stations across 4 counties now use as their gold standard. But the project that brings tears to my eyes every morning is the Elena Fletcher Memorial Environmental Learning Center, built on the exact spot where Marcus tried to destroy our original pier. Children now learn about watershed ecology where my wife once dreamed of watching sunrises, while their parents discover that education conquers regulation every single time. Elena would have loved seeing kids catch their first fish from the teaching pier, then release them while learning about sustainable ecosystems. Her memory lives in every child who discovers that protecting the environment isn't about rules, it's about understanding why clean water matters. The William Fletcher Environmental Engineering Scholarship Program provides $60,000 annually to students who might not otherwise afford college. 4 recipients have already returned as professional interns, maintaining the very system their scholarship money helped create. William's quiet genius now funds the next generation of water stewards. Property values increased 28% once buyers realized they were investing in genuine environmental protection instead of HOA theater. Our community became the regional poster child for how private water rights and public benefit can work together when adults make decisions instead of bullies. National media couldn't get enough of the story. CNN featured us in their Good News Friday segment. The Wall Street Journal wrote about innovative private-public environmental partnerships. I even got invited to speak at water management conferences, though I still prefer my morning coffee routine to hotel continental breakfasts. The best revenge. Our annual Watershed Festival now draws over 4,000 visitors, who come to see what happens when communities choose cooperation over conflict. Local businesses thrive. Kids learn environmental stewardship. Property owners understand their actual rights versus what power-hungry bureaucrats pretend to control. Jake Anderson started an ethical construction company that specializes in environmentally responsible waterfront projects. His business card reads, "Quality work, fair prices, no corruption," a not-so-subtle dig at Marcus's criminal enterprise. Jake's waiting list stretches 8 months because competence and honesty never go out of style. Every morning I sit on Elena's memorial pier, coffee steaming in the cool air while automated monitoring systems quietly protect thousands of homes from flooding. Great blue herons fish in crystal clear water, while osprey nest in platforms we built specifically for wildlife habitat. Sometimes I tell Elena about our unexpected journey from grief to community leadership, from harassment to healing. I think she would be amazed that her final dream became the foundation for something neither of us could have imagined, a living example that ordinary people can defeat extraordinary bullies when armed with patience, proper research, and refusal to surrender. The lake holds more than water now. It holds proof that communities flourish when leadership serves everyone instead of personal ego, that environmental protection and property rights enhance each other, and that justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Williams Engineering still prevents floods 95 years later. Elena's love still inspires environmental education. Victoria's harassment accidentally created the most effective water rights awareness campaign in state history. Here's my challenge for you. Research your property deed before accepting any HOA's claims about your rights. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments. Let's build a database of knowledge that helps homeowners fight back against clipboard tyranny. Don't forget to subscribe to Karen Stories for more tales of ordinary people who refused to be bullied and ended up changing everything. Hit that notification bell. Next week's episode features a neighbor who built a fence on my property, not realizing I owned his entire driveway. The fight against petty tyrants never ends, but neither does the satisfaction of watching them face consequences. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If this episode made you laugh or shake your head at HOA madness, hit that like button and drop your opinion below. We post HOA Karen chaos and neighborhood showdowns every week, so be sure to subscribe to catch the next unbelievable story.